Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Professor Oleander, and we are once again playing around in Run 8 Train Simulator. I've been trying like 5 times to do this video, and I usually do it whenever I get off of work, and I'd worked a 10-hour shift, and I'm just tired, and none of them showed up. None of them turned out very well, so I decided I'm going to do it today in the daytime. I'm off today, thank God. It's one of the few times that I'm going to have off in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then after that, I'll have a semi-normal schedule. So what we have here is, this is the Cadiz local as it's been named in the past. Just a couple of GP40s and some SD40s. These two SD40s, these are Jake and Elwood. These are my yard switchers for Barstow. Right now, they are isolated, as you can see. They're just there for weight. What I had done was I had taken half of this, the half going back towards Cadiz, with these two locomotives, and when I got down there I wanted to bring them back to Barstow, and on top of that there's a Y in Cadiz, so I went ahead and I turned Jake around, so now that they're facing opposite directions instead of both facing the same way. So I decided instead of deleting them and then going back and spawning in 2 other ones, because these are consecutive number engines, and having to go through all the trouble of spawning them in, trying to get 2 more consecutive ones, because this is 3355 and 3356. I decided, why not, we'll just throw them on this train and we'll just tow them back. So it's not a very long train. We've got a few loads. I think all these are empty, actually. I can't remember, is it green that's loaded? Okay, yeah, green is loaded, or red's loaded. Yeah, all these are loaded, so we're probably going to have to bring those engines online at some point. But for right now, let's go over what the purpose of this video is, and it's mainly just to answer some questions that people have asked me, in various states or various times throughout the years, ever since I've been associated with railroads and stuff like that. People have asked me, what's it like working for the railroad, and how do you get a job with the railroad, and things like that. And I figured, what a better way to tell people than to actually run a train. Just making sure I've got everything set up. So I had started this train back in Cadiz, and now we are sitting in Ash Hill. We're sitting in Amboy. We're heading to Ash Hill. And so yeah, I figured this would probably be the best way to actually do this. So let me set the independent brake here. And we'll pull down 10 pounds on the train brake just so that everything holds, and then we'll knock off our hand brake, or our parking brake, line ourselves out. So these switches go through Siberia. We don't have anything to pick up until we get to Ludlow, so I'm going to line us into Ludlow. There you see we've got the high ball. Generator field switches up, throw it into forward. Go ahead and load, throw off the independent, and then release the train brake, and kind of watch. Go ahead and start pulling. There we go. So yeah, the questions that I get asked by people are, what's it like working for the railroad and stuff like that, and I like it. The people that I work with like it. It's a different kind of job. It's a job that most people want to get. I don't know that everybody understands, what all it entails. It's not so much just running trains. Yeah, that is a big part of it. Depends on what you're doing. But, the biggest thing is understanding what you're getting into. It's not always You know, you're not always going to be on a train going down the main line on a regular schedule. You know, there's some other stuff that goes into it. You've got inspections, you've got rules and procedures that you have to follow, and it's a very, I don't want to say, you know, very dangerous job, but I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. In the years past, a lot of this has been remedied, and it's a lot safer than it used to be. However, there are some things that can still go wrong. I mean, we're coming up to a road crossing right now. On a real train, you face the possibility that somebody could run past the gates, and you know, you hit them. And whether it's your fault or not, 95% of the time it's not your fault. But you know, that's just the world you live in. But I mean, I don't work for a Class 1. At one point, I was going to work for a Class 1, and I decided against it. I tend to like short lines a little bit better. They don't get as mired down into politics as the big Class 1s do. Some are under union agreements, some of them aren't. It just depends on where you are. It's largely, you know, who you're working for. We're not, where I work now, we're not under union, you know, that sort of thing. But, you know, depending on what you're looking for, the railroad could be, you know, what you need. You know, I tell people that I work for the railroad, and they just kind of go wide-eyed, and they're like, "You do?" And I'm like, "Yeah." It's a fairly prestigious job. Even today, when you tell people that you work for the railroad, it's almost like you watch people turn into little kids. They're like, "That is so cool," and you know, it is. Like I said, I love my job, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. But there are some headaches involved with it. My job is fairly involved because not only am I an engineer, I'm a mechanic, so I have to kind of keep them going. And I only do so much, and then the rest of it, we have a contractor that comes in and certifies them, and that sort of protects us, and it protects me, whereas it's not that I'm not capable of doing it, it's just for a heavy job like that, like if we have to replace an engine, or if we have to replace a power assembly, or you know, something like that, it takes some of the liability off of us. It's kind of not necessarily passing the buck, but it just takes some of the stress off of me having to worry whether or not it's going to be able to get done. We'd rather have somebody, you know, I'm overseeing a contractor because I do know quite a bit about these engines. I'm overseeing a contractor come in and do the work, and then I'm basically the oversight, saying, yeah, he did it correctly, and I feel safe running it. Otherwise, I go back to him and I say, hey, you need to address this, or you didn't do this the way that I think it should have been done. Kind of my job description right there. I do a lot of the servicing, the 92-day stuff, and the annuals, the contractor will come in, we'll load box them. We'll load box our engines and make sure everything is good to go, so that way we don't have any problems. But you know, as far as getting a job with the railroad goes, the thing that I always tell people is make sure you're getting into it for the right reasons. If you think it's just a cool job, you might want to think twice about it. And I'm not saying that it isn't a cool job. I'm just saying there's a lot more to it than, you know, sitting in the seat and playing with the controls. There's a lot of groundwork that's involved with it. You know, when you're doing switching, like I've done switching, I do a lot of switching, and it's fairly tedious. It's not necessarily stressful, but it's kind of demanding, physically and mentally. When you're having to do a lot of switching work, which if you're going to try and get into the railroad through transportation, you're going to start as a conductor. And what a conductor is, it's not like it used to be in the old days. The conductor stayed back and he dealt with passengers and stuff like that, you basically own the train. That's the simplest way to put it, is you own the train. When the train leaves the yard, it is your train. The conductor is the person responsible for the movement from A to B. He tells the engineer is only involved in the movement. He's under the conductor's orders, which is bizarre how it works out, because the engineer gets paid more than the conductor. But the conductor is the boss. The engineer is just the driver. The conductor is the supervisor. He has to make sure the engineer is doing it the way that he's supposed to be doing it. The only thing the engineer is there for is just to make it go. We used to have a joke that the engineers only knew how to do three things: go forward, backward, and stop. And that's pretty much the gist of it. That's about all he does nowadays. Is the conductor is telling him what he needs to do, and then he does it. He's almost like an independent contractor in a way. The conductor says, we need to go here, and then we need to stop here, and then we need to make a cut. We need to back into this siding, pick up these cars, pull out, line the switch back into the original cut, and then we're going to do the brake test, and then we're going to do all that. And the engineer just says, okay, sounds good. But in terms of the actual planning and the movement, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, that's all the conductor. That's what his job is. He has the most responsibility on the train. The engineer has a fair amount. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say the engineer's kind of got it laid back. I kind of am in a way, but I'm not. But yeah, the conductor is the guy. If there's a problem with it, they're going to the conductor. They're going to say, what happened? Then they're going to go to the engineer, and they're going to say, what were you doing when this happened? But yeah, the conductor is going to work. The conductor's quote-unquote office is on the ground. He's usually working on the ballast. He's walking a train. He's doing wheel counts. He's checking. He's walking down the train and checking the brakes and checking this and checking that. And he's filling out his paperwork, his wheel sheets, and then his switching orders, and then he's contacting the dispatcher, and he's getting track authorities from here. If they're doing maintenance of way work, he's got to call in to the roadmaster or the section foreman or whoever is out there working on the ground. He has to get authority from them to go over a certain area of track, and it's fairly involved. The engineers like I said, I didn't want to say that the engineers got it easy, but the engineer kind of does have it easy. But railroads do not hire engineers. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize, is that railroads do not hire engineers. We're coming up on a detector here, so let me be quiet for a second.
BNSF detector, milepost 668.0, main 1, ambient temperature 88 degrees.
But yeah, the railroads do not hire engineers. They are trained up. If you go into transportation, you'll start out as a conductor. You'll be working the ground. You will not necessarily be assigned to a crew. You're going to have different engineers on different whatever, because you don't have seniority. You'll be working at different times of the day. And what will happen is you'll get, I think they're still doing 6 months. Or not 6 months, 6 weeks. You'll go into training for 6 weeks. Then, and it's usually in Georgia. It's usually not far from here, actually. NS has a facility in McDonough, and CSX has a facility just south of Atlanta called the Ready. BNSF is, I can't remember where theirs is. They're somewhere out west. It's not Wyoming. I don't remember where it is. And then UP, I'm pretty sure it's in California. But you'll go to these training centers, and you'll be there for 6 weeks, and they'll teach you the ins and outs of the job. You'll go through some hands-on experience. You'll do what's called a hang test, which is some railroads don't use this anymore. I know CSX and NS do, but you'll be hanging off the side of a car, and they'll give you a lantern, and they'll tell you to give a hand signal. And I think it's a 3-minute test, but you'll have to hang off the side of a car for 3 minutes, giving the signal. It's either a proceed or a back up, or a proceed or a reversing maneuver. And then they'll tell you to switch. And what you have to do is you have to switch lanterns in your hand, maintain 3 points of contacts, and do it in the other direction. And I think you're allowed one time to fall. Then after that, you're pretty much done. But yeah, you'll do 6 weeks there. It's a lot of tests, a lot of signal tests, a lot of just general knowledge stuff, a lot of classroom stuff. You will work. You'll get paid to do it, but you'll work. You get paid a per diem. You get a meal allowance. Most places will give you a meal allowance. They'll put you up in a hotel. It's probably not going to be the fanciest thing in the world, but they'll put you up somewhere. I can't remember if they'll give you a car or not. I don't think they do. If I'm not mistaken, some of them will offer you like a shuttle service. They'll have like a crew van or something come and pick you up, and then they'll take you to the facility. But yeah, you'll do 6 weeks there, and then you'll go to your terminal, and you'll do, I think, 6 more weeks worth of on the job. You'll do 6 weeks worth of on the job, and then you go back for like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. This is how CSX does it. I think NS is doing it the same way, but you'll go back for like 2 or 3 weeks back to your training center, and they'll go through some more classroom stuff. It'll be a review of what you've learned. The reason why they want you to come back is they want to make sure that you're retaining the stuff that they've taught you, that you're actually learning, stuff like that. They're just wanting to make sure you are on the same page as they are in terms of what's what's required of you. And then you go out on the line. And from CSX, from people that I know with CSX now, what they will do is when you get your seniority date, you get a yellow hat. You get a high visibility hat. And what that high visibility hat means is you are a new guy. You're a rookie. And that is telling all of the train crews that you are a new hire. That is so they know to be keeping an eye on you. And it's all in the name of safety. It's not belittling to anybody, but it's there so that everybody knows that you're a new guy. You may not be used to doing some of this stuff, and you might do something that's not necessarily the best thing to be doing. And so it's everybody kind of looking out for you. Now, most people are not going to throw you under the bus. Another detector.
Detector, milepost 672.5, lane 1, ambient temperature 87 degrees.
We'll try and make it up this hill without bringing those other 2 engines online, but if we drop down below 30, I'm going to go ahead and bring them on. But yeah, most guys that work on the railroad, they look out for one another. I look out for my guys, they look out for me. We're all in this together. That's the way we always looked at it. And it's just one of those things. Now you're going to meet some guys that not necessarily going to like you. Don't take it personally. Most guys are actually there trying to help because they've all been there. You know, when we get new guys, we'll haze them a little bit, but that's about the extent of it. When I mean like playful hazing, like you know, we'll just kind of chide them a little bit and whatnot. It's sort of a rite of passage. You know, you're stepping into the world of people that have been doing this for a long time. The lifers, as we call them. And these are the guys that have been in for 10, 15 years, and they know it. They know it in and out. You know, this is every day of their life. They live this stuff. And you're coming into their world, and you have to show that you belong. You have to earn the respect, because that's one thing that can't be bought, bartered, or not bought. I forget what the saying is, but it can't be bought, it can't be bartered, and something else. But you have to earn it. And a lot of guys just don't take kindly to them, and they purposely will be mean on purpose. That's a redundant statement, but whatever. But they'll be mean on purpose because they don't want to like you. The reason why they don't want to like you is because they probably have seen guys just like you come in here every other week. They have to take time out of their schedule to train you, and then, you know, heaven forbid you wash out. And it's kind of like, well, then they have to repeat the cycle again, and they just get tired of it. There was a guy that I knew that worked on a short line railroad that they were going through guys every 90 days. I won't say a whole lot on that, but because I know what was going on, but I won't comment on it. But they were having to train a new guy every 90 days, and it got to the point where the crews were just so furious about it, because they were having to train somebody new every 90 days, and it got to be just, you know, on top of the work that they were already having to do, it was just so it's just so aggravating. And some of the guys that are out there on the big railroads, the class ones and whatnot, they kind of got the same mentality. They don't like that they're having to take time out of their work schedule, you know, to train somebody new. Engineers hate sitting still. If you get a job with a railroad, you're gonna learn that real quick. Engineers hate sitting still. I can tell you from experience, I hate sitting still. It's more like, come on, let's go. Why are we sitting here? Get it done. Let's go. And 'cause it gets boring. But you know, that's some of the stuff that you can expect. Especially if you get a job with a conductor. As a conductor, you're gonna meet some guys that aren't gonna be friendly. Don't take it the wrong way. They have your best interests at heart. I'm not saying that there aren't a few bad apples out there that would more than gladly throw you under the bus just because that's what they're like. But let's see, what's my amp gauge doing here? It's holding. If it starts popping up to 900, I'm probably gonna bring those other engines online. Yeah, I'm probably going to bring at least one of them online. I don't want to. Let's see if it'll hold over 25 miles an hour. This train is very slightly underpowered. I should be using one of the 4,000 horsepower units, because these engines are only 3,000 apiece, and I think I've got 3 on right now, so that's 9,000. I should really have 2 and then either a GP or an SD. 2 of the 4,400 units, and then 1 of the road switchers. And I think I am going to, I don't know, it's kind of a crapshoot. So 3.2. It's holding. I'll look at it from this way. If it keeps dropping, we'll hold it. But the amps are staying steady, so I think we've kind of hit our bottom. But this is a fairly fairly deep, steep grade. I think this is like a 1% or a 1 point something. We don't have too much further to go before we go downhill. That's why I'm kind of hesitant to bring those engines online. But, talking about getting jobs with the railroads, the best way to do it is to obviously apply. The railroads are getting ready to hire a whole bunch of people. They've already started hiring a whole bunch of people. They are looking for people that have solid work experience, which is, guys that have been in jobs for long periods of time, people that have worked around heavy machinery, people that are fairly mechanically inclined, people that are trustworthy. This is a word, probably the best word to describe it. I'm going to let it go because there is a hill on the other side. Once we get over the top of Siberia, we'll be going downhill, and the signal is just up here past this curve. Can't really see it. There it is right there. Once we get over that hill, or once we get past that signal, it'll be downhill. I think we're just going to bring it under 900 RPM, or 900 amps. So, but yeah, they look for people that have a stable job history, that are trustworthy. They're used to working around equipment like this. The biggest thing for them is an ability to work with a team, to work as a team, and to follow the rules. Railroads are very dangerous. They're very expensive. This is a very big, very expensive, and very dangerous piece of machinery. This particular train with these few cars on it weighs 2,846 tons. There are 5 locomotives in this consist. Each one of these locomotives, I believe, weighs about 180 tons apiece. And they are worth, I can't remember, I know the Jeeps weigh somewhere around 100 and, I think they're like 160. And then the SD40s are closer to 200 because of the extra axles. The extra axles in the larger trucks. To replace these locomotives, you're probably talking about, with the Jeeps, probably $250,000 a piece. The SD40s are probably going to be closer to 400, just because of what they are. 400,000 a piece. When you get into the big units, like the SD60s and the SD70s, you're talking $1 million plus per engine. The ES4400s, those big engines like that, the 4,400 horsepower engines, the 6,000 horsepower engines, which are kind of rare now. Matter of fact, I don't think there's hardly any of the 6,000s left. And that's the SD90s and stuff like that. But you're talking anywhere from $1 to $2 million a piece. So very expensive. And the reason why I'm saying that is they need people that they can trust with this equipment, because it's very expensive. And, they need people that are going to be the attention to detail and doing their job as safely as possible. We have a saying as well, no one ever got in trouble for going slow. It's not rush, 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 rush. It's do the job, do it right. So, they look for people that were mechanics. Prior military is always a huge boost. Prior emergency services, EMTs, fire, police, National Guard, anything military or emergency response or stuff like that. That will get you a big up in the job pool. The other thing to consider is if you've applied for jobs and you don't hear anything back, it's not necessarily a bad thing. To give you what my situation was when I was applying for railroad positions, I I had applied with BNSF and CSX and Norfolk Southern. I don't think I ever applied with Union Pacific. I don't think I ever applied with KCS or CN or CP because they were just too far west. I applied with BNSF and CSX and NS, and I kept getting, like rejected. Or not rejected, but I kept getting the thanks but no thanks. And that's not necessarily a knock against you. It just means that of the people that have applied for this job, they have found someone that better suits their need than you do. And that's not saying that you're not qualified enough. They just found somebody that was more qualified than you. And I did that for about a year. And I was constantly getting these emails saying, thanks but no thanks. And what happened was, it was probably the middle of September, and I used to be the Civil War reenactor, and I was at an event, and I had my phone off, and this was on like Sunday evening. I turned my phone back on, and I noticed that I had like these 3 or 4 different emails. And in looking through the emails, I had 2 emails from BNSF. And one was from Sheridan, Wyoming, and the other one was from Gillette, Wyoming, and they were invitations to a hiring session. And I was kind of stoked about it, and I was sitting there trying to figure out how am I going to make it from the East Coast, because I was living in North Carolina at the time, to Wyoming. And it probably wasn't an hour later, I got a third email from CSX out of Charlotte, inviting me to a hiring session. So, just because you don't hear anything for a long time doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to get it. They have to really review whether there's a genuine need for those positions, because the freight traffic varies so much from day to day and month to month that they have to genuinely need somebody there, because they don't want to hire you on and then that job, then the traffic drops down, and then it turns out they didn't need an extra conductor, and they've just wasted all this money training you, and they're not going to need you. Because I had applied for that position with CSX in like June, and here it was September, and I'm just now getting the email saying, hey, we need you to come down for this session. So what I ended up doing was I sent an email to the HR person that sent me the email from BNSF, and I told them, really appreciate the opportunity to come out and speak with you guys. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to make it, and I hope that in the future, we get a chance to talk about this again, or something like that. But I basically said, I really appreciate the offer. I'm not going to be able to make it. And she sent me an email back, and she said, that's fine, no problem. Appreciate you telling us that you can't make it, and hope everything works out for you. And that's something that's important. If you get an invite to a hiring session and you cannot make it, tell them you cannot make it. You don't have to go into detail, just tell them you can't make it. They won't knock you if something happens, because they know you've got a life. If you don't plan on going, or you can't go, and you don't tell them, that's bad. I don't know that they keep records of people that don't show up. I'm sure they do. But take the responsibility if you're not going to make it, and tell them you're not going to make it. It's not going to hurt to tell them. It's actually going to play to your benefit, because you're taking the responsibility for that. So, this hiring session up in Charlotte, went to it. I had like 2 hours of sleep, because I had just got off work at like, it's probably 5:30, 6 o'clock. I got home. I had to pack my stuff, because all the stuff happened over the space of about 4 days. I had like a week between to get ready, and I was out of town whenever I got the email, so I had to get home, and then I had to go into I had to find a place in Charlotte to stay, because I lived like 3 or 4 hours away from Charlotte. So I had to find a hotel in Charlotte, because Otherwise, I was going to have to get up at like 12 o'clock and drive, because the hiring session was at 7 o'clock in the morning, I believe. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But I would have had to get up at like 1 o'clock at night. This was after getting off at like 6 in the evening, and then have to drive 3 or 4 hours to this interview, sit through the interview, because don't know how long it's going to last. It's probably going to last most of the day, and then have to drive 3 or 4 hours back. So I had to find a hotel, which it turns out there was a conference in town, so it was, hard to find a place to stay. Then get up there, and it was still like 12 or 1 o'clock. I mean, it was like 11 o'clock before I got to the hotel. Then I had to get something to eat, and then just kind of chill for a little bit, because I couldn't sleep, because just, you get that anxiety of, you got this job interview. And for me, where I was in life at that point was just like, I wanted to get out of the job that I was in so bad. I hated it. I hated going to work every day. I hated the work that I had to do. I was working in a print shop at the time, and it was just mind-numbing work, and it just was not me. And I was really, really wanting to get this job. It would have been a huge opportunity for me at the time, and I just had that anxiety, and I couldn't sleep. And I think I finally ended up getting to sleep at like 2 o'clock in the morning. I had to be up at like 4:30. And of course, during the night, I'm studying these questions, because I had some stuff that kind of helped me out. A gentleman had written a book called How to Get a Railroad Job. And this is a guy that I can't remember what railroad he works for. It's somewhere up in the Northeast. Alright. Take a break from the store for just 1 second, because I just saw the amps go over 900. Are they going to come down? What's the speed looking like? Speed coming back up, or is it going down? It's holding. I'm going to let it go. I don't want it to go any higher than that. It's coming back up. I'm going to let it go. But yeah, how to get a railroad job, and you can still get it. It's fairly pricey. It was $75 at one time, but it's a good read. He gives you some insider stuff, and the guy's trying to make a little bit of money on the side, so whatever. This was way back before I had really had any real knowledge of the railroad, and so yeah, I'm going through the stuff in there, the questions that they might ask you, and what's the good response to give, and stuff like that, and then go to bed at like 2 o'clock in the morning and have to get back up at 4:30. And the reason why I got up so early, the hotel that we were going to was, I think it was like the Sheraton at the Charlotte International at the airport, and it was just right down the street. It was like a 5-minute drive, but I had to get up, and then I had to get dressed, and then all this. And the big thing is show up early. Like you said, the interview wasn't until 7 o'clock in the morning. And if you're going to get a job with the railroad, you get invited to a hiring session, be there no less than 1 hour early. And I'll tell you why. I got there at like 5:45. It was probably, I think it was actually like 5:30. And we couldn't, there was another guy that was down there that I had met up with. Turns out that he had got invited too, and we kind of figured both of us were looking for the same place. So we got together, and we were trying to find, what room this hiring session is going to be in. And what made it so difficult was CSX was all over the place down there, because they had the entire Florence division was at this hotel. They were having some big conference. So we were trying to figure out, because all these rooms, we told the receptionist, we were like, we're looking for the the room where CSX is doing the hiring session, and she told us one. We go in there, and there's like these tables all over the place with these name tags on them, and it's like road foreman and division supervisor or something like that, and we're like, this ain't it. So we're scrambling trying to find this place, and what happened was we told them, we're like, no, is there another room where CSX is going to be at? And she told us, and went over there, and we hadn't been there 5 minutes when the HR representative that was going to be over our hiring session came to us, and he greeted us and shook hands and all that, and he said you're here early. I like that. He said that means you're punctual, you take responsibility for your stuff. I like it a lot. You guys already in my good books, and that's why you get there early. That's why he was there at 6 o'clock in the morning. He was looking to see who was there, who was already there, who's got their stuff together. That pays off down the road. So yeah, anything you can do to make an impression on them. Now, don't go full rail fan and say that was whatever. You can do some idle chit chat or whatnot, but don't go full brown nose, because that can hurt you just as much as help you. Because then they can say, well, you're just a rail fan, and railroads don't typically like rail fans. Not saying that rail fans don't work for the railroad. I know a couple of them. But yeah, they're very hesitant about rail fans. So another tip for you in the hiring session: if you are a rail fan, don't say saw Q such and such or saw, oh God, I can't even remember the train numbers now. L whatever, or it's local coming out of whatever, and it had this unit on, and it had so many axles and stuff like that. Don't do that. Don't do that. They want people that are serious. They don't want rail fans. They want people that are going to be responsible and take a train from A to B, not somebody that's going to be more worried about what unit is pulling what train, they're going where. But yeah, the hiring session was I think there was 9 guys applying for the position. I can't remember if it's either 1 or 2 openings that they had. I want to say originally it was going to be 2, and then they scaled back to 1, so only one of us was going to get it. And it was the HR guy and the road foreman. Not the road foreman, the train master. Both of them were conducting an interview. And they go through everything. They tell you a little bit about CSX. They tell you about where you're going to be working, the name of the place, what the projects are that they were doing. That particular yard, they were getting ready to add 10 additional tracks for intermodal service. That was purely what that was for, was intermodal service. This is back when CSX was really trying to get into the intermodal business, because they were falling behind big time. And they're very slowly catching up to it, but NS and BNSF, they are miles ahead of them. The Bellevue yard that NS just opened, the other half of Bellevue yard that NS just opened up is just, it's enormous. Anyway, but yeah, they go through that and they tell you all the stuff that's going on, their projects, and a little bit about the job. They tell you about the benefits, they tell you about the pay, the union agreements, all that sort of stuff. They'll ask you some general questions. They'll ask you, what are the major Class 1 railroads? What's the Harriman Award? This is back when the Harriman Award was being offered. The Harriman Award was the award for the safest railroad in North America, which happened to be NS for 20 years. But it's no longer offered because one railroad kept winning it. Go figure. What else? The first thing that we did, though, was they had a job brief. And I've interviewed with 2 railroads, and both of them did the same thing. One was a short line that's up in Virginia, which if they called me tomorrow and offered me a job, I would really have to think about it. because that railroad up in Virginia, I won't say names because I don't want people hounding them to death, and plus I got first dibs. That little railroad up in Virginia, class act. Those guys, that's a railroader's railroad. I mean, they are nice guys. They take care of their people. And so, yeah, if they came up tomorrow and offered me a job, I would really have to think about whether or not I was going to take it. I mean, it would be hard not to take it, to be honest. But that railroad and CSX, they both did a job briefing. It was basically, they'd ask you something like, who knows where the fire exits are, where are the fire extinguishers, what's the escape plan, and whatnot. And then they would go through CPR. They would say, who's CPR certified? Which, if you can get CPR certified, go for it. If you want a job at the railroad, get CPR certified now, because that will pay off. Because that will impress them that you are taking additional steps outside of work to get certified in safety. But they were asking, who's CPR certified now, and then they basically assigned. They said your primary care, your secondary. They assigned somebody as sort of the guide if the building were to burn down, if the building caught fire, or if there was an earthquake or something, some kind of disaster where the building had to be evacuated. Somebody was going to lead the group out. They were going to be responsible for everybody in the room, making sure everybody gets out. And then, you had your CPR responders and whatnot. Another big thing was they told us, if you get out of your chair, push your chair in. And they watch you. If, we took a break about halfway through, and, you get up out of your chair, and then they're watching to see who pushes their chair back in. Because when you go into that session, you've got to treat it like that's your job. This is your job, and they're watching you. These are the rules that you have to play by while you're in this room. Or, while you're with them. These are the rules that you have to play by. So when you get out of your chair, you push your chair back in. And they're checking to see who's paying attention and, who's there just to be there. So, excuse me. Oh, it's a lazy day today. But, let's see, what else? I mean, they went through that. They give you the quote-unquote scary talk, which is, it tells you about all the bad things that can happen on the railroad. Working on the ballast, working on uneven surfaces, working when it's 100 degrees outside, working when there's a foot of snow on the ground. Having a knuckle break while you're out on the line. It's happening towards the end of a mile-long train and having to carry this 80-pound knuckle back to the end. And I remember after they'd sent us out, after the session was over and we were all out there waiting to be interviewed, I remember we were all talking about it, and one of the guys said something about, I don't know about carrying that 80-pound knuckle all the way down there. I said, don't worry about it. I said, most of the time, if you ask the engineer nicely, he'll throw the knuckle down, or they'll throw the knuckle down on the ground. They'll pull the train forward. You throw the knuckle up on the last car, then you ride it back. It's like, oh, I was like, yeah, don't worry about all that. But I mean, most of the time that's what happens. I've seen that happen too many times where, an engineer, because it's always the engineer's fault. Remember that. They're going to tell you it's your fault, but it's the engineer's fault. If I were to bust a knuckle on this train right now, it would be my fault, because I'm the one at the controls. The conductor ain't got nothing to do with it. But I'm going to blame the conductor. I'm going to tell him it's your fault. But anyway, they go through the horrors of it. People getting killed, people getting hurt. Long hours. Proportionately, the pay is actually about equal to the job that you perform. So, I mean, there's that aspect of it. But yeah, they go through that, and that's basically just to deter the people that are kind of on the fence. It's whether or not you really want to get this job or not. And then they go through, I think I went through the benefits and all. I can't remember. It's been like 2 or 3 years ago since I did it. But yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And then they send you out into the lobby, and then they'll call you in. I think they called us in alphabetically, and then you sit down for the actual interview. And it's, they'll ask you some general questions about, they'll say, tell us about you, what's your work history here, and then they'll go through your file, and they'll say, noticed you worked here, and you left, why'd you leave, basic interview questions, and they'll ask you the railroad stuff. And one of the questions they asked me was, the particular yard that I was at had about 10 years worth of non-reportable accidents, or they had 10 years free of non-reportable accidents, which is cuts and scrapes and bruises and stuff like that. This was a train master asking me, he said, what can you bring to the table to help us further that? And, you go through and you tell them, whatever. One of the questions that he asked me was, and it was actually a really good question. I was kind of surprised he asked it. He asks, we have a lot of older generation guys that are working for the railroad. These are guys that have been here for 15, 20 years. They have problems. Some of them have problems with the rules, with new rules that are coming down or current rules that are in place. Some of them feel like the rules are in place to hinder them or to make their job more difficult or whatever. And basically what he was asking was, he said, what would you do in a situation if you were working with one of these gentlemen and they were coming to you complaining about, or they want you to do this one way, the way that they had always been doing it, as opposed to the new improved, the new procedure that's more safe, or the new company guidelines. And it's a very tough, it's a tough question. It kind of took me by surprise, and I won't say an answer because I don't even remember the answer that I gave, but I won't even tell you what to say because I'm still not 100% sure of what would be a correct answer for that. But the best way, the safe answer is going to be any procedure you take the safest course of action possible. That's what they want. They want safety. Safety, 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 safety. You will hear that word 1,000 times when you go into a hiring session. Safety, safety, safety. So if you have doubts, if they give you a question that you have doubts about, give them an answer that pertains to safety. Keep it relevant to what to what they're asking you about, but stress on safety. And that's the best way to do it. I don't know what, I really haven't thought about that question in a while, but the best way to answer that is to say, stuff about safety. And that was pretty much it. They only asked me like 3 or 4 questions. Do you feel do you feel like you have the abilities to perform your job as described, and just stuff like that. But and that was pretty much it. And of course I didn't get the job, but that was fine. It was an eye-opener because that was the first job. That was the first time I'd ever interviewed with the railroad, so it was an eye-opener for me. This is how Class 1s are. Now this was CSX. You go and talk to NS, it's going to be completely different. You go to talk to BNSF, it's going to be different. They're going to be similar, but they're going to be altogether different. But yeah, just kind of wrapping it up because I think I'm coming in on an hour here. Railroads are great, but they're very dangerous. There's a lot going on. It's not all it's cracked up to be. There's some ins and outs to it. Stuff that the public doesn't necessarily see. A lot of people just see the trains going back and forth. If you really want to know what it's like, if you happen to live near a yard and you can get a cheap radio scanner for like $35 on Amazon. Look for Baofeng's. That's what I'm using now. Baofeng, Baofeng, and you can program them to listen. You can put in separate frequencies, and if you get a chance, or you live near a railroad, or you live near a yard, kind of listen to the crews and just kind of get a feel for what they actually have to go through. There's a lot of moving back and forth and things like that. There's a lot of sitting. I mean, you might get a train and be sitting for 12 hours and never move. On top of that, you know, you might get stuck with somebody that you don't necessarily like, which would be tragic. And plus, whenever you first hire out, if you're in transportation, you're going to be put on what's known as the extra board. Which the extra board, that's all the trains that need to be moved, but nobody has bid on them. And that's one of the things about seniority. They have boards, and trains are bid on according to seniority. So the people that have higher seniority than you are bidding on the trains that are regularly scheduled and basically pie jobs. The trains that are left over are the ones that don't have a regular schedule. They run in the middle of the night. You know, they're aggravating to move. Something about like this train right here. This train's underpowered. You know, nobody wants to run this train because it's underpowered, because you're going to be going up this hill at 25, 30 miles an hour, and you know, notch 8, and you're just kind of sitting there twiddling your thumbs because you can't really do anything else. And you know, those are the types of trains that get put on the extra board, the ones that go out at like midnight or something like that. You know, it's an all-night run, or there's 3 million cars that have to be switched out of it because there's a lot of just tedium, and nobody else wants them. And if you stay with the railroads long enough, you'll get enough seniority where you can bump people out of your positions. And that's the other thing to consider too, is that you can get bumped out of a position. You can't get bumped out of your conductor position, but you can get bumped off a train. You know, somebody with higher seniority than you, he can say, well, I want to run that train, and then they bump you out. And I think now, I don't know if all the railroads are doing this. I think now some of them have got their job boards online, so you can actually bid on a train online. You put in your employee number or whatever, and then you can actually bid on a train on the internet, which is kind of cool. But you know, you can see what trains are going out when. You can put in a bid, and then, you know, put in a bid on a train, or you know, your first and second picks, and then the caller they'll give you a phone call and they'll say you're taking this train or whatever, or this is the train. These are the options that you have left because you were outbid on these other ones. But you know, it's a different world, and I know I didn't answer a whole lot of the questions because there's a lot going into in talking about just railroad jobs in general. So if you've got any other questions, just let me know, and I'll try and answer them as best as I can. You got to remember, I don't work for a class 1, so it's kind of hard for me to speak to a lot of that, but get this slack in. And of course the speed limit just went down to 55. So yeah, with all that being said, I'm going to get this train under control here because we're going downhill. And let's bring on some brake. This is the problem with using road switchers, is their dynamic brakes are not that great. They're better for lighter trains. That's why I didn't want to take these. I wish I could use the train brake, but because I don't want to use the dynamics at all. But as you can see, the brake cylinder is crept up. That's the brakes on the engines, and there's no way to bail off them in this game, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. So with that being said, I'm going to cut this video here, and if you're interested, I'm going to finish running this local, and I'll make another video on that. So with that being said, take care, everybody. I will see you